To the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the 3rd of September 2026. Just a reminder that it's a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll start off with declarations of interest. And it looks like we have none. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Tobel and Councillor Tipple.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 20th of January. Everyone, Martin.
Sorry, I'm marked as present, although I had sent my apologies for the meeting. I was actually abroad, so...
That might have been because I thanked you in the chairman's announcements, or I briefly mentioned thanked you for your contribution at the cabinet. So, and I know you were, yes, you weren't here, because I said, oh, it's a shame you're not here. But yes, so thank you. And at which point, if we are assuming everyone happy with them as a fair and accurate reflection of the meeting, take that as carried. And then I'll take on to the chairman's announcement. So I'll thank you again, Martin, for your contribution to, which means we've got the Ripper thing, as you see, coming back. I thought you made a really good contribution to that. I would hope that Cabinet were already thinking on those lines anyway, because they instantly went, yes, this needs to come back. But thank you for the way, I think you sweet talked them into it even more. So thank you. Other than that, I have nothing else to announce, except that obviously we saw it on the agenda, that the Ripper thing is back before us. Hopefully that might be require less discussions. I think we actually liked it, but obviously we just had that blip that we need to deal with. So we'll move on to public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chair.
Okay, straight on to Cabinet reports and the revenue budget and council tax for 2026-27 with Rodney. Hello, Rodney.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight you've got the three papers that form the overall budget proposals for this council for next year. So that's the revenue budget, the capital strategy and the treasury management strategy. We'll take each in turn. So these come here tonight and they will then go on to Cabinet next week on the 10th of February before going on to full council on the 19th of February where you set the council tax for the council. So very much starting with the revenue budget, as you'll note, the key point very much is there is no proposal to increase council tax next year. The proposal is to freeze it at £134.91, which is obviously the same as last year and indeed the year before. I'm just going to point a few points out from the report, if I may. So first of all, on page 17 on paragraph 3.4, we have now got a 3-year funding settlement, and the figures announced on the 17th of December are in the table on paragraph 3.4. And the key thing to note is very much that we've got the figures for 26-27, but then the 27-28 and 28-29 ones will reduce slightly compared to next year. So that means it's a real terms cut in funding going forward, and that assumes that we put council tax up to the maximum. So even if we're okay to set the budgets for this year, we've got to be aware that actually in future years we're going to have to absorb all the inflationary pressures, and indeed if we want to not put council tax up again, we'd have to make further sort of changes to the budgets in order to meet that. So that's quite a key point to be aware of. So but it is good news, we have now got financial certainty for the next 3 years. These figures will change each year slightly, but it does give us a funding envelope to be able to plan further advance for. Also very much want to say this paper sets the council's budgets, but also need to aware it sets the fees and charges as well. So section 6 of this report sets out the changes to fees and charges, and this year it's proposed a 4.6% increase in most fees and charges, and that's in line with our charging policy, which says that fees and charges will go up by RPI each year. And page 24 as well is where we put the information about special expenses. So this is where we collect money specifically for 2 parishes, very much for the street lighting for the provision in those parishes, and that's Great Witchingham, where it's proposed for the council tax special expenses will go down from £10 to £8, and Helston will go back down from £15 to £10. Also, as it's a budget report, I need to provide the Cabinet and Council with advice, and my advice very much is the proposals here before you tonight are robust and if they are accepted, then the level of reserves that will be left after these proposals is sufficient for our needs in the medium term. But that was all I was going to say, and open for questions.
Thank you, Rodney. First person I saw was Mark, and then we'll go to Jonathan.
Hi Rodney, mine's only a very quick one. 6.6 on the bin collections. It says going from 70 to 73, but the comment is a £5 admin fee. Is that because there's already £2 of that being used?
So the standard charge is £68 if you provide by direct debit, and if you don't pay by direct debit, it's a £5 on top of that for the additional administration. So that's where it takes from the 68 to the £73. So that's where the £5 admin fee comes in.
Jonathan.
Yeah, just regarding the level of reserves for the medium term, obviously where we're talking about the sort of like 2 or 3 years with a medium sort of term, if you know what I mean, with that. But is that including earmarked reserves as well, or does that, are you just talking about a general figure of the total as opposed to sort of looking at it where they're all broken down into different things? Because obviously looking at that, if you say you've got enough reserves to go forward, but you've got some that are earmarked for some things, obviously if something else goes wrong, you're not allowed to use them. Or are you just talking about a general figure?
The advice I give is related to all our reserves, but in this paper, in section 8, it very much focuses on the general revenue balance reserve, and that's showing that we estimate even at March 2027 there'll still be nearly £7 million in that general reserve. There is more information on some of the earmarked reserves as part of the capital paper, so there's some information there, but with a level of reserves.
Anybody else? Peter.
Sure, thank you. A parish question, really. Since I represent Great Witchingham, please explain to me what the implications are for the parish council. And secondly, have they been consulted about this, and were they satisfied with the answers that they may have received through any consultation?
I'm doing this related to the special expenses. So this is actually matters for the district council, because actually we do the street lights on their behalf. If they wanted to, they could take it on from ourselves, but as this is something that we do for the benefits of their residents, it's for us to decide the level of charges. So we haven't consulted on them specifically on there, but I would hope that most residents would be quite pleased to see a reduction in the charge. And the reason being is we obviously made some changes to put in new street lights a while ago, and the amount we need to set aside to keep repairing them isn't as much as we thought, so we don't need to keep putting back so much into reserve for future replacement. So there's sufficient money in the street lighting reserve to cover any replacements for the next few years.
Thank you, Rodney. No, thanks for the report. It was a detail in here. I know you said it when you sort of delivered the report there. You were saying that the council tax would be the same as the current year we're in and the previous year, but I thought last year we put it up by £5 at the start of the year. It didn't go up. I thought it did. Oh, okay. I don't know. I didn't head it went up. Was it the year before then? Am I getting mixed up? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
2024, it went up by the minimum, the £5, the maximum you're allowed to do, not the 5% or the 4.99 or whatever. But then last year it was frozen, and then this year's frozen. So that, yeah, it's all right. Stuart.
Yes, thank you. Could you just give us a little bit more information? I see we've opted out of the business rate pooling, which we've been doing for many, many years. If you could just, I mean, I'm sort of reasonably au fait with how that works, but can you just talk us through that, Rodney? Because obviously the different formula with which it's being calculated is well, obviously different. But if you wouldn't mind just give us a talk through that, because obviously that's a decision being made by all the local authorities, I assume, to not pool, or is it just us? Sorry.
worth probably stating to start with, the amount that people get charged in business rates is a different matter from the pooling. So obviously there's been lots of changes for that going forward and lots of people seeing different business rate charges. But for pooling, it's all to do with the amount of the business rates income we keep. So there was a baseline set a few years ago, and if we got more business rates than that baseline, we were able to keep more. What they've basically done is reset the baseline, so we only get to keep growth above that new baseline. And it's really difficult at this point in time to know whether we're going to see growth next year or not next year, because all the charges have been changed. So it was considered across Norfolk actually the upside risk of the potential benefit from pooling was so small, and there was still a downside risk that it wasn't beneficial to keep that pooling benefit going forward, but it is something we'll look for future years as well. And it's certainly not as clear cut that there will be a pooling benefit going forward, because the rules have changed significantly from there. Yeah.
Can I just say, I mean, it doesn't affect my ward, but I do like the way that we're continuing to share this money back with regarding the street lighting in the two wards that we mentioned, Helston, well, wards, parishes that we mentioned, Helston and Great Witching, because I think it's good that we're not hoarding this cash just because we've managed it well, that we're actually sharing it back. And I don't think there's been a big groundswell or like mass public campaigns or, you know, people and placards in the streets of those villages saying we want our money back, but actually just saying to these people, we can share this with you. You know, you're being, there's an opportunity here to share that back. So I just think that's great. We're continuing that. I'll let Peter speak again.
Chairman, I'd have to say I'm delighted that there's going to be no increase in council tax. I will admit it came as quite a surprise when I read the report, having read the answer to my specific question in the last meeting we had, which was a masterpiece of saying very little. I kind of assumed there was bound to be an increase in the pipeline. So to say I was pleasantly surprised to see that there wasn't is a big understatement. So anyway, well done. My question then is, given that we've had 2 years, yes, 2 years, Frank?
Yes, sorry.
Of no budget increases, I would obviously like this to continue because obviously we owe it to our constituents and residents. How are we going to progress from where we are now to where we need to be in a year's time to ensure that doesn't happen? So would I like to see, well, yes, what I'd like to see is a base budget review, which I think if we're going to do it, ought to be done at a very early stage in the process, because we mustn't assume because we've done things before, we should continue to do them, because there may be other things that are a greater priority, and there may be things that actually we don't need to do because others do them better, or perhaps we shouldn't be doing them in the first place. As a supplement to that, I have seen work in councils previously where a star chamber has been a particularly effective means of reviewing the way in which budgets are compiled, asking very stringent questions about why we're spending this money. So I would very much like to see those two scenarios incorporated in our actions going forward so that we can continue this excellent work of not increasing the council tax.
I think you're right. Setting the budgets going forward gets more and more challenging every year, sort of thing. And one of the reasons we're actually having to set a no increase this year is if when you look at, I think it's Appendix B, where some of the budget movements are shown, and actually we've been able to identify nearly £780,000 worth of cost savings this year compared to last year's budgets. And we've done that very much this year. We focused on where did we underspend last year and see if we can drive some savings out. And I'm sure there'll be another mechanism put in place to try and drive out savings where we can, if possible, not affecting our frontline services. With regard to whether that should be a star chamber or any other mechanism, I think that would be for the Cabinet to consider. But I think we also need to bear in mind that with LGR potentially coming forward, that is like to take a lot of resource diverted towards that. So I'd be surprised if there was anything significant on that budget approach coming forward. But if it wasn't for LGR, I'm sure the Cabinet would be looking at sort of what they could do to bring forward more savings. Can I also just come back about the council tax increase? I think for the record, it's probably worth that. That's obviously just our element of the council tax. Obviously, Norfolk County Council is proposing a 4.99% increase. And I just found out today that the police are putting their council tax up to £344.79, which is again is a 4.5% increase for them as well. So when your residents do see the bills, they will still see an increase in the overall council tax bill. It will just be that the element relating to this council will not be going up.
I think we were suggesting about the star chamber element. You're saying by the time you've created the policy, drawn up the plans, come up with something that's passed through all the elements it has to go through, the cost you'll have won't be retrievable in the remaining few months left of the council. I think that's probably what it's suggesting. But Peter,
maybe we just should put it as a formal proposal to the cabinet, because who knows? We know that local government reorganisation is supposedly in train. I have my doubts whether it will move to the speed that is being proposed, and I think we should work on the basis, A, it might proceed, but B, it might not proceed, or it might not proceed at the pace that's proposed. So I think we should still nonetheless put in place strong measures so that we do what we can do in order to reduce the costs for our councils.
Corinne, you want to come in? Sorry, I was looking the wrong way. I was thinking I can't see anyone indicating to speak. Corinne.
I was just going to say, as part of setting the delivery plan and the delivery plan informal workshops that we have with members, we do take a start, stop, continue approach to that, where there is an opportunity to be able to feed into projects or existing initiatives that are currently in flight or suggested in the plan as opportunities to stop, which obviously may have a financial impact. So there is an opportunity in terms of that mechanism that exists in terms of start, stop, continue with any of the activity that we currently have at the moment.
I think as we're mentioning at LGR as well, I don't know if people have spotted in these papers, but actually for 26-27, it is proposed to put £1 million aside towards the cost of LGR. So there's a recommendation actually to say actually we put this money aside, but delegation to spend that isn't in place. That'll be to myself in consultation with a leader. And obviously, if an LGR decision does take place, perhaps by the end of March, we'll probably need to review that and make an assessment of actually how much would be needed for the LGR process going forward. Because when you look at the initial submissions, the costs of LGR, even the lowest estimate was about £30 million. So it's something we just need to be aware of, that if an LGR decision comes forward, there may well be a need to look again at some of these figures.
Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was last year we were expecting that we might receive some money from the Rural England Prosperity Fund. Did we receive anything at all? And if so, have we spent it?
So we have received money in the current year for the Rural Prosperity Fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund, but there's no expectation that we're going to get the new money in next year. I don't know if George wants to say anything.
Yeah, I was quickly trying to find the numbers. So for REPF, no, I can't find the numbers, but we have spent it. So REPF was allocated to Business Builder in the end, so it was provided for additional capital funding for Business Builder. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund capital element then went to play areas to help us meet our obligation or commitment around improving play areas. So yes, that money's gone to meet the expectations that I set out.
Has anybody else got anything, Stuart?
No, it's just an observation. the number of responses on the consultation, 54.
When is that?
Yeah. Engagement with local democracy. I rest my case.
Yeah, I guess it can either be a silent majority of the element, or it can just be that getting engagement at every level. The council tried and looked at these, and against numerous policies which people you'd think must be really interested in or have a real relevance to their lives, but still no one wants to fill in the forms and do that. It's a shame, because the more people that respond, the more you feel that you're actually representing their views. But go on, Stuart, and then we'll take Shane after.
An observation on that, I think it's just quite typical about the lack of public engagement in any form of political process, because the vast majority, whoever that majority is, feels it doesn't work for them. So the attitude is we can't be bothered because it won't make any difference.
Shane.
Well, just on that particular subject, question that rises to my mind is what measures have been taken to encourage or increase participation in a consultation?
So this is very much where we try it through our Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts to publicise it. And I believe at the last meeting of ONS, the leader of the council did say that next year we would make sure that we email all members with all details of consultation, so that you as members can promote them in your sort of communities as well.
Has anybody else got anything? Yep, Martin.
Thank you. My question was on the table on 7.2, and the assumption then that this year, obviously, we've got the council tax freeze, but for all the years following, that will be the full 5% increase. And then for 2028-29, the margin of difference there is, I mean, I presume it's about £75,000, looking at that there. And with the cost pressures and everything else, is that realistic?
I think if I was sitting in this position, many other authorities, they would be showing significant budget gaps in future years. So the fact that actually we've got a small surplus is actually a really positive position to be in. But you're right, actually it is a small margin, and that means we can't take our eye off the ball. We still need to be vigilant, looking at our costs, our income, to make sure that actually we can sort of deliver a balanced budget in future years. And I think that's one of the reasons why Cabinet is reluctant to make future decisions on council tax, because they will take every year as it comes. Their prime concern, as I said, was very much to set a balanced budget, and if that needs a council tax rise, then they will make that difficult decision. But I'm sure they will do their best to actually keep council tax as low as possible.
Thank you. So that led on to my other question, which was around the temporary accommodation. Obviously, we purchased the houses, and that's been fantastic for us. But is there future plans for additional temporary accommodation to help alleviate, based on the figures that were coming through in the projections that were done coming through around the increase in the requirements for temporary accommodation in future years?
I think you picked up there on a key pressure and problem in our budgets, and indeed a lot of district council's budget is increasing pressure from temporary accommodation, and indeed this budget has increased the amount available for spot purchased accommodation from £810,000 in the current year to just over £1 million next year. So even with all the action being taken, we're still seeing that pressure coming through. And indeed, when you look in the capital budget for next year, there is a provision for potentially £2 million of additional purchases of temporary accommodation. That will be looked at to make sure there is the need to do that, because obviously the best thing to do is to avoid the need for it by actually diverting people away from needing temporary accommodation, providing other solutions. But there is that provision in that capital budget if it's needed to buy extra properties. And I think it's worth saying at the moment we've got the agreement to buy properties and we're still purchasing some at the moment from some of the latest decisions that will come on stream. But it is still a significant issue for ourselves and most other district councils.
And previously we've used LAF funding, and has that now ceased, or is there an element that will still come through in future years for LAF funding?
The government has announced a further LAF funding, which is going to be made available for 26-27. We're waiting, we've been given indicative details of what that funding amount is and what the requirements are for that. We submitted an initial expression of interest and are waiting further details to flesh out the detail of what they're expecting is to be required, so we can consider it further about whether it's something that meets our requirements.
Yeah, I think that was when I questioned it last time around the LAF funding, and we put in an expression of wish and a bid for it, but we didn't know what we were actually bidding on, and therefore did we have sufficient funding to enable us to do that? So that's where it was coming from the previous question as well.
Anybody else? I'm sure people don't want me to read the recommendations out because there are a large list of them, but only that the press will probably watch this video back in 3 weeks' time and then try to write reports if it's just happened, and just point out that 1.3 does clearly state that Band D council tax remains at the same level, of i.e. £134.91 for general expenditure. Just say that because I've seen things printed sometimes online which claim we're not doing that when we are, or that sometimes actions of this council are credited to South Norfolk District Council. Because the press do seem to get mixed up by the name. So just thought that was really clear. But all those in favour of the recommendations are stated. Thank you very much. I would say thank you, Rodney, but Rodney's going to be staying for some time. We'll move on to the capital strategy and capital programme for 2026-27 to 2030-31. My word. Rodney.
Thank you, Chair. So again, the revenue budget is very much our day-to-day running expenses. This is our longer-term investment programme, and very much the key document I would bring your attention. It's in Appendix B on page 48, and that's where you get a line-by-line breakdown of all the items in the capital programme. It's probably worth saying that a lot of the items in the capital programme don't change significantly year on year. So disabled facilities grants, we keep putting £1 million aside towards that, offset by funding from the Better Care Fund. We have ongoing investment in our IT, things like our street lights. The ones that are probably worth pointing out, already mentioned the £2 million for the temporary accommodation programme. The idea would that be funded half from our reserves and half potentially from borrowing again. Also got in there the Broadland Country Park Visitor Centre, some money to finish the completion of that, so that's on site, and that's just a continuation of that programme. And there's a couple of projects for GNGB funding, very much the Nest project and Blowfield Park projects. Probably also worth saying, as you say, it's all the way out to 2030-31. You may say we may not be here in 2030-31, but it's still important to keep an eye on what we would need in the future, because obviously someone's still going to be providing these services. We are still going to have to buy refuse vehicles and things like that post LGR. So it does give ourselves an idea of what's needed, but indeed any new authority would also be able to use that for their initial capital programme if that's established in 2028. Probably also worth saying, below that table you've also got a summary of how the capital programme is being financed. Very much a large part of the programme is financed from capital grants, some funding from our historical capital receipts and new capital receipts, and you can see there some of the earmarked reserves being used to fund some of the capital programme. Well, that was all I was going to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Who would like to ask something on this point? Go on, Martin. I knew you were going to.
I'm glad you said about the going out to 30-31 with the capital programme. I have mentioned before about, and again, it's probably in the later part of the paper about the Greater Norwich Growth Board 5-year capital plan, where we still haven't seen the Rackheath development come on there, and therefore no future spend at the moment for any improvements to the proposed leisure facility or anything else like that. So that was my concern on that element, that it's still nothing there.
Anybody want to comment on that? Or you just have some statement of, yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to have to. I didn't quite hear the question. It's my ears. It was to do with Rackheath and the development, but I couldn't quite hear mine.
Sorry, yes, I had raised it before around the Greater Norwich Growth Board, because obviously the planning application is in, but it hasn't gone to committee. I think that is imminent. But therefore, looking at the future requirements under the Greater Norwich Growth Board, and therefore also the Broadland's commitment to any additional help and support towards the any future leisure provision.
So you're right, just in terms of the planning application will be going to committee in either the end of February or the very start of March, but I think it will be the end of February committee. And once we've got that, assuming we get that through, because it may well not get permission, but if it does, then the developers are very keen to crack on and get going with that very quickly. If you want to talk to me outside the meeting in terms of the specific details of the Section 106 agreement, I think that will be helpful in terms of giving you the confidence that the leisure and school and such like will come forward. It's just there's a lot to go through, but it will all be clear in the committee report. But perhaps if we discuss that separately, if that's helpful.
Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I appreciate that the capital programme projections are projections only, especially the further out you go, the more of a projection they become. I'm just intrigued. One of the line items, which is for IT infrastructure, for 26-27 budget, we have just under 83,500 allowed, and then nothing estimated till 2030-31 year. All of a sudden jumps to 921,000. Just intrigued how you have arrived at that figure, please.
I might get Colin to come in on this, but essentially you have a big 5-year refresh of all your major infrastructure, and you may recall, I think it was last meeting, we got agreement to actually carry out some of the work in the current year to do a big refresh of the infrastructure, and that would then mean in 5 years' time we're probably looking at a similar large sum, but replacing all your servers and everything is not a cheap business.
Yeah, thank you. The comment I would make, it is all really academic and irrelevant, because with LGR, it will just blow a hole through the whole lot. It just won't be, it won't bear any semblance to what we'll actually be spending, where we'll be spending it, and how much we'll be spending it. It's all very nice, all very academic, all very correct, and Rodney's absolutely correct. I'm not being disparaging of what Rodney's doing, because he has to do it. But the relevance to what we'll actually do won't be relevant at all.
It's a little bit like planning my holiday spending for the year 2092 and thinking I'm pretty certain I won't be going on holiday that year, but I've planned it anyway. Yeah, I think 121 I'll be past it. Rodney.
I think I should probably just say for the record, obviously there has not been a formal decision as yet. We think it's 90-95% likely, but Norfolk has been in this position before when it came back and didn't happen in the end. But I think you're right, this time it is looking far more likely, and these will be academic budgets going forward.
But at least we know it all does add up, and thank you, Rodney, for that. Just noticed there's no line about Thorpe Lodge. Obviously, there's maintenance of Horizon Centre and things like that, but is that included within, am I missing something, or did I completely... where is it on here? Am I just going bonkers? I'm probably missing that. Or perhaps it's been twisting my head.
So it was a revenue cost to maintain Thorpe Lodge, and obviously when we do sell Thorpe Lodge,
And thought, because that's, you know what I mean. When I saw that, I thought we would have. But thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Probably worth saying, obviously when we do sell Thorpe Lodge, there will be a capital receipt coming in at some stage, hopefully for that building, which will obviously help fund future capital expenditure.
Thank you. If no one else has got any other points to make on this, and I don't see anyone indicating such, we'll take the recommendation on this. The two recommendations there. All those in favour?
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we move on to the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2026-27, and again, Rodney.
Thank you. This is the longest of the three documents, and it's also the most technical. But it is important. We do have some £50 million worth of investments out at the moment, and this is a document which basically says where we can invest that money, and if we need to borrow, where we can borrow money from. So this document really does constrain us to what we can do, so actually we don't just invest in anything that isn't approved. In general, we tend to invest just in key banks with high credit ratings, and this policy doesn't change much from year to year. There are a few changes, however, being pointed out in paragraph 3.2 on page 52. One of these is quite technical, and that's an accounting change related to the right of use assets. But the other ones are actually removing our ability to invest in long-term gilt-edged securities, bonds or property funds. I see. And the reason there is very much, we've never done it in the past, but with LGR it's probably less and less relevant that we do that. I wouldn't really want to put money aside in a long-term property fund now, given we're not certain what's going to happen in the future. So this change is very much just putting that restriction in, so even though we're not like to, this means that we couldn't do unless we came back to update this strategy as well. It's also suggesting a change to actually restrict our ability to put longer term investments in place. So again, it probably would be sensible to put aside £5 million into a 5-year investment. So again, we're just tightening up on there. I don't think it will change what we would have done anyhow, but it's just putting that framework in place, cognizant of LGR. Probably worth saying, our treasury management is important to the council. We're expecting to get 1.1 million in investment interest next year, which obviously helps support the overall revenue budget. So it is an important contribution to the overall position of the council. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to ask a question on this? Martin.
Thank you. I was just going to mention, as we always do, the 91 fund. Really, so it's on sort of like 9.4 and 9.5 where we've stated it around that. Now I know that we switched out some of it, but overall, since the original investment into the 91 fund, looking at this, has it actually appreciated or has it depreciated? But we've generated the income, which is, I think, is what the overall fund was saying.
So the book value of this fund is £8.3 million, and currently the market value is about £7.5 million. So there has been a depreciation on the actual value of that fund. That has to be borne in mind, though. We do get a return. So over the past sort of 10 years, we've had a return of about 4.5% each year on average from that fund. So we've been seeing a return, but the capital value has gone down. And that's part of the reason why we're actually putting them into the accumulation fund to build back that market value back to the book value. But there is technically a loss on that value of that fund at the moment.
And obviously that loss would not be recognised until that's actually liquidated.
Correct.
I'll just jump in. I've got Fran and then Mark, but Tony is chairman of audits. Is it something relating to the 91 fund that you want to come in on? So I'll just, since that's related, I'll just go to Tony.
Thank you, Chair. overall return from that fund is actually income and capital growth. And it's for the period that we have held this, most of the period we appear to have held income units, so the capital value would not have appreciated, because the objective of that fund is to produce a high level of income. And the income from that, on average, over the last 10 years, has been around about 5.25% per annum. So if you add that back in, and plus the fact that some of the period we have now converted some of the holdings that we appear to have into accumulation units. So it's a matter of optically it doesn't look really good, but quite, one can sit down and spend a bit of time on this in order to come out with the real internal rate of return of the fund. I can say I know the group extremely well and at that particular fund, and the fund itself has actually averaged just under 6% per annum, over the last decade. So unless we were expecting more from it, which I put it to the council that we shouldn't be, because we should only be looking at making investments which are low risk, and this happens to be a low risk investment, that the total return from that fund is actually should be within our expectation, and it is within, it's a reasonable return, although optically it doesn't look right because of the way we've changed the units and the period of time that we've held it.
And I guess also in that 10-year period, we also had that phase where we were literally getting less than 1% if you have your money in the bank, 1%, 0.5%, 0.25%. So I guess it's better, in what we've had in the last 2 or 3 years when interest rates were high, it looks, like you could have got better in the bank. But over that 10-year period, you're saying it's worked out a lot better than it might have done. So that's my interpretation of what you're saying, Toby. If I'm wrong, Tony, wave your fist at me. No, it's fine then. I'll go to Fran and then I'll go to Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask about the projected external borrowing. And I know we've spoken about temporary accommodation, and I'm guessing that's where we're looking at doing this. Is on page 77, 16. We talk about sort of over the next year. It's basically looking at 1.972 million. And another million the following year. So basically we're going to go into whatever unitary with 3 million of debt, where we've always been basically a district with no debt. So that's projection here. And that is obviously around, I'm guessing that's around temporary accommodation. Well, we had lots of conversations around that. Well, on a chart further on page 81 in appendix 7, we talk about projected interest rates. And we're not going to get close to 4%. We are close, dare I say, but closer, like 4.1 projected around March 27. And the cabinet members always said, well, the figure is always said to me and others in this room, I think, is 4%. Well, it doesn't look like we're going to reach that before we're actually defunct. So has he changed his position, or have we as a council changed our position about when we're going to borrow? Or if we need to borrow, because obviously if we've got money sitting in the bank, why would we borrow at 4.5%? That's my question, really. Thank you.
You're absolutely correct. This is the borrowings associated with the temporary accommodation that's come through cabinets and councils to approve that. So this is the current approved potential borrowing. Again, a very clear cabinet that actually they will only borrow if and when interest rates are at sufficient levels so that actually the return from the rental income covers that borrowing cost. But it does pose an interesting question: if it never gets to that point, will we borrow at all? And if we don't, we do have sufficient earmarked reserves to be able to cover that cost if we needed to. But at the moment, the position is we are still monitoring the interest rates, and we will make a decision as and when it's appropriate to do so. But as you say, interest rates aren't falling, and indeed, even when we're seeing base rates fall, we're not necessarily seeing a reduction in the PWLB rates that are, because they follow more like the gilt market, and that isn't necessarily following the Bank of England base rate.
There's also the situation that when we're going into a new unitary, we'll also be sort of we'll have our arm tied up back a bit about how much we can actually borrow, won't we? There'll be restrictions about what we can borrow and what we can borrow it for too. So it could possibly be, timing wise, that we're in a situation where we're not actually allowed to go down that road. You can tell me if I'm incorrect. I'm sure you will.
I would have to check whether the structural change order, when that enacts, would actually stop us from borrowing if it was in our agreed plans already to do it. I doubt it would, because that would just be seen as a routine transaction. But I think it's worth pointing in that actually, even if we ended up borrowing £3 million, once we become a unitary, whatever the size of it, be it 1, 2 or 3, the current county council has got nearly £800 million worth of debt. So an odd 2 or 3 million is going to be a rounding error for what the new unitary will inherit.
Mark, when you cut across your throat, I thought you were saying something else. I thought, it's not that bad, but thank you. I think you stated several times when we questioned about the borrowing, potential borrowing for the temporary accommodation, and I think we had cabinet members sat at the back at the time telling us that and it was very clearly stated by them, we will only borrow when it's sort of cost beneficial. There's not that we can recoup our cost of the borrowing and fix it at a rate that means that it will not be have a negative effect. So I hope that they were statements made by Rodney, and I trust Rodney, and I'm sure those cabinet members said those in good faith without wanting to change their mind on that. So, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Rod, literally just dwelling on what the Chair just said, that we're only going to borrow when we feel it's cost effective for us to do that. Do we know at what level of interest rate the proposition becomes a real proposition for us to be able to actually borrow rather than continue to fund it from our own resources?
We have a little model which says actually for this property, what is the rental income we're getting, what's the running cost, and therefore what would be that interest rates. But it will depend on an individual property as well, because actually if you've got an HMO, you're getting probably more rental income for that one property than if you just got a single family in a 2-bedroom sort of a flat. So it may well depend on which property you're looking at, but very much it is on a individual basis of actually what's the rental income for that property, what's the running cost, what would be the net income in order to cover that sort of borrowing cost.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they would like to ask? Okay, we'll move on then to the recommendations. I'm sorry, Tony again. Sorry, Tony.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, Ross. So what you're saying is effectively we are going to be borrowing on and using each individual property as security. Therefore, the rate may well change. Setting aside the securities that we're looking at, the properties that we will be looking at the time, we must have an idea what the blended rate would be for us, which is the ideal rate for us to be able to go and actually borrow as against using our own resources.
I can't recall the figure off the top of my head. It is somewhere around the 4%, but I can confirm that. And it also depends on what percentage of that overall cost you're going to borrow as well. So actually, if you're actually borrowing 50% of the total purchase price, it's a different figure to if you're only borrowing 20% of the overall purchase price.
Thank you. This time I may get it right. Has anybody else got anything else they want to ask? Let's move to the recommendations as stated. All those in favour?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll then move on to, I think we lose, he'll probably still sit there for support. On to item 10, the finance report for quarter 3. So Rodney from Rain in Place, joined by Darren.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So the report before you is a summary of the financial position at Q3 at the end of December for revenue and for capital. Just going to highlight a few key points on the report. So at the end of December overall, we're forecasting a predicted favourable variance of 634,000 on the cost of core services against the budget of 15.8 million. Most areas are performing favourably against budget, and with outturn levels of investment income that are expected to be close to budget, which will lead to an unanticipated transfer of funds to the general reserve at the end of the year. The council has spent 7.6 million on capital schemes so far, and the outturn at the end of the year expected to be 12.45 million. Aside from the noting these positions, there are two additional recommendations in the report. Firstly, to set aside part of the increased planning income, £250,000 of that, to the planning appeals reserve, and secondly, the creation of a new homelessness reserve from in-year savings on those budgets, on the temporary accommodation budget. And the report details variances across the different areas in the appendix. And happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin.
You'll be surprised. I was just looking for a little bit further clarification on page 88, the fifth line down. We have ICT Future Council's funding with zero budget, zero annual budget, then an actual to date 424, estimate outrun zero. And then when we look at the page 95, so we're showing the £609,000 grant with the 185 future council project spend. So the balance of that funding, is that being spent within this financial year, or will that be for future years? Will that be 25, 26, 26, 27? And what does that actually relate to? Yeah, the grant will be rolled forward into future years. So we've got the grant into this year. The split there just shows the grant that we've got to spend, what we're spent against it. The line in the main table just shows the net position, but we can then roll that forward into next year to progress those future councils projects. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Martin. Sorry, I didn't realise you came back on that, Martin.
And has that actually been earmarked on what we actually need to spend it against?
Yes, it has. So the funding was more of a research and development pot centred around cybersecurity. So there's been a number of initiatives that some of that has been spent on, things like updating, patching software to reduce cyber threats and make sure we're in a good place for that. You'll note in the delivery plan that comes a later item, there's some work around robotic processing automation with a view to using technology to create efficiencies in terms of how we process some of our administration tasks. So some of the money is ring-fenced to doing some pilots in association with that, with a view to then coming back with a business case once we understand more around the value in which that could bring from an investor save perspective.
Thank you. Did I see Fran right here? Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that I noted on here on page 92 actually around the underspend at the waste depot, and it's just nice to see that we're getting close to completion there, and actually we've got an underspend as well. So I just want to say well done, really. But that's all I wanted to say, really. It's good. It's very clear. Thank you.
Can I just ask? I think it's a really good idea, the having this planning income set aside, because obviously we don't want to be in a situation where we're intimating that we can't take action or we can't actually make a stand where there's where we think we've got a strong case because the money isn't there or it will dent the funds. So that's a good idea. I notice it's about appeals, planning appeals, which I know can be very expensive. But do we have any money set aside for similarly enforcing applications? Because I know there's been situations in the long distance distant past, before I was a councillor, but I know from my family's experience being involved in these things that sometimes the council's been unwilling to enforce actions because of the cost when there's been a clear breach of a planning application, and it's been sort of, well, we haven't really got the money and that's very expensive. And I know that's a different ballpark thing, but actually we need to be really tough on fighting the applications in the right way and making sure that they conform to things, but also then making sure that when they're passed, that the enforcement is there to make sure that bodies follow what they've been given, or developers. I mean, I think recently back to Horsford as well, how long it's taken to get a single traffic light in for a bus gate. I mean, that's taken years for that to happen, and it's not really progressed at speed because no one's sort of had the wherewithal to do it. But just a quick question around that.
That is certainly the intention. It's the idea that making that a reserve wider is to cover planning costs, planning and enforcement costs, not only just external legal and appeals costs. So actually the idea was it's meant to be wider than that. Perhaps we need to just tighten up the wording on that a bit to actually say part of that ability to use it would be for, as you say, proper enforcement where that's necessary.
It was just all right to add a little bit to that as well. Obviously, there are occasions as well when we go to enforce it, we can claim costs back as well from parties. It depends on each case, and also the cost of each one is dependent on whatever it is as well. So I think if obviously it'll go to cabinet, but I completely agree with Rod. If we just tighten that wording up, then it will cover all of those things.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Martin, you look like you're about to say something and stopped yourself. You don't? You sure?
I think it was more around when I read through a lot of the explanations on here. A lot of it was to do with staffing on there. So either the increase or the decrease in there, where we either used agency staff where it's actually cost us an absolute fortune, and another element where it's, we haven't recruited, we haven't filled posts, etc. So given the nature of a lot of the spend in there, how understaffed are we now at present?
Good question. It's a question of, I suppose, the thing with the salary budgets, it's one of our biggest overall budgets that we have to set at the start of the year, and it's also one of the ones that's the most difficult to predict because there's so many changes in staff. But across the whole council and all the departments, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I know we've got finance, we're sort of well resourced at the moment, but it just changes from department to department really, depending on availability of the skilled staff, where staff go, how many staff leave to, it's very hard to pin down really.
And I think that is one of our strategic risks on our risk registers, and indeed one of our strategic performance indicators is staff turnover, where we're seeing quite high levels, but no higher than sort of is general in these days. And I think we are seeing that. Just it does take time to recruit new members of staff occasionally, particularly where we have some difficulty recruiting, like we do nationally, things like planning, environment and health officers. So again, we've got a strategy to grow our own through apprenticeships. So we're doing a lot in this area to try and make sure we're an employer of choice, so people do come to work for us, they do stay here, and where necessary we're training people up to be the next generation of the government employees. But it's not easy, and I think it is one of the areas we need to keep focusing on to make sure we can retain and recruit staff.
And obviously the LGR situation will have impacted on that, on looking at trying to recruit people into an unknown world of what will actually be.
There will inevitably be some churn as a result of that, but there's also part of you say actually if you're a bigger authority, there's less chance of say us nicking Broadland staff or Great Yarmouth sort of nicking our staff, because actually we'll be part of a bigger unit. So there are some advantages from being a bigger authority, and I think we're seeing with remote working as well, you can recruit people from a wider field as well. If you're only expecting people to be in the office sort of 1 or 2 days a week, they're more likely to be prepared to travel a bit further for those roles.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? No? Well, there we go. Thank you. You can see the recommendations for this. I'll state it there. I'm not going to read them out. All those in favour of the recommendations?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. You can both, Rodney, you can go now. Thank you so much, and thank you, Darren. We've got the Strategic Performance and Risk Report for Quarter 3, 2025-26. And Matt.
Thank you, Chair. On performance for Quarter 3, we have 2 red measures over the last quarter that are assessed as within measure owner, the Assistant Director or Head of Services Management. They are working days lost to short-term sickness and the contamination rate of recycled household waste. On that performance, it is assessed as due to seasonal factors, and the performance report notes that we do still have slightly lower contamination rates than the county average. We also have 2 performance measures that we haven't met targets for at least the last 4 quarters, but they're within tolerance thresholds, and we are seeing an early sign of improvements on those. Those are our percentage of food businesses with food hygiene ratings of 4 or 5, and the number of missed bins. With missed bins improving after some extra operational changes needed additional management with Veolia. We've had 24 other measures updated over the last quarter where we are meeting performance objectives, including targets where those are set. Some of those have an indication of deteriorating performance under the variation category. That's an early sign that we should increase attention on their performance, but shouldn't be a cause for concern in the near term, particularly where we are consistently meeting the set targets. I'll move on to the risk aspects now. So the key update there is that we have 2 new risks added. One is the risk of local government reform impacting our ability to recruit or retain staff. And the other one is damage or deterioration to Thorpe Lodge, reducing its potential sale value. Happy to take any questions on any of the aspects of performance and risk, Chair.
Thank you. You did just touch on what I wanted to ask, but I wanted a little bit more clarification around the number of decreasing aspects where it's still within the tolerance, but they are decreasing because it does seem to be a lot more now than in previous periods. But your comment that we don't need to worry about them was a little worrying in itself. So just on the measures that have got decreasing, can you tell us what actions have been taken to ensure that they don't decrease in the future?
Sure, so you will see for each measure the actions that are being taken to manage performance in future being detailed in the action box in the last field, as well as the work done over the last quarter in the main commentary field. For that deterioration indication, what that means is that the performance has, to some degree, been deteriorating over the last 4 quarters. However, when combined with the assurance indication, which gives a signal about how consistently we're meeting those targets, again, an indication of meeting assurance means that we've met targets for at least the last 4 quarters, and the latest quarter's RAG status, if we have green indications for both the latest RAG status and the longer term trend of assurance, then in that case, in a practical sense, a deteriorating indication under variation should be of small concern. In some ways, it's the least important of the 3 categories that tell us about the current performance, but it's the best one for having an idea about things that are changing from the way that the performance is being managed at the moment. So how that might change over the longer term.
So if we were to look at page 120 then, on the affordable homes delivered, on there where that is a decreasing one, but the action to me didn't seem to personally didn't seem to say too much. I mean, Housing Labour will continue to work with house builders and housing associations to maintain the ongoing delivery of new build affordable homes. Now, obviously, there will be some impact around nature neutrality and the number of homes being delivered following that, and the perception would be that over the last 2 years the house builders haven't been delivering because of the nature neutrality. So again, we're now getting the housing applications go through, but those will take time to come through to fruition. So is that going to be in the near future or the long-term future?
So that dynamic that you're talking about does play into how we are representing that performance. Some things outside our control, meaning that it may vary more than we would like. I wonder if George would like to add any comments on this.
Yep, happy to contribute. By way of context, the annual target for affordable home delivery in Broadland is 95. 139 affordable home products have been delivered already this year. So that's the context in which we're viewing that reducing trend of delivery over time. Of course, you've touched on some of the practical challenges for housing delivery. This is just part of the wider picture. We do expect to see housing volumes decrease in the near term because of the challenges you described. But of course, there are some larger sites coming forward in the future. Practically, and in the commentary explained that there are some practical challenges for the council in relation to our temporary accommodation challenges and others, and we're acutely aware of that. And there's a number of actions that we're taking as an officer group to understand what mechanisms we can employ to address some of those challenges. But practically, we are an enabling function, not a delivery function, but we'll continue to work where we can.
As Tony will no doubt assure members also, we discussed these performance reports and strategic risks at the audit committee meeting on Thursday last. And I think the general theme there was, where there are areas of concern, red or amber, we felt, I felt, but I think we felt as a committee, that the explanations as to what was being done in order to remedy these shortfalls was in many cases inadequate. We couldn't honestly determine whether there was an improvement in place, what was being done to effect an improvement, and generally the quality, I think it's fair to say, was suboptimal, being a bit generous. Is that fair, Tony?
I think that does sum it up. We certainly felt that more explanation as to the direction of what's being done would be suitable. It certainly would provide more information for us, which will make us more comfortable and enable us to take whatever steps necessary, because as it looks, it just doesn't look enough. to be able to make a judgment one way or the other.
Can I just ask, are you looking at the, sorry, how did you put it, submission 8?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could clarify, so audit committee don't see the performance reports, they see the risk reports. So could you just clarify, are you talking about the risk commentary?
Sorry, Chair, I was going to say it was the risk report rather than the performance report.
Okay, Lacey, I think you were next.
Thank you. Page 109, measure 18, employment rate, latest data 31st of December 24, measure 20, business survival rate, latest data 31st of March 23. Do not have any updated data on that.
So the measures that you refer to there are annual measures, so we expect the updates on those to be reported next quarter as part of quarter 4 reporting.
But we've got a 23 measure on there. That's nearly 3 years out of date.
What that reflects is that the information that informs that measure is retrospectively collected and made available. So while some reports will be updated this quarter or updated in quarter 4, at times that will rely on returns that we've submitted and had validated for previous periods, and that will be the latest reliable information that we have available.
Further clarification from the back.
Thank you. Yeah, we use the Office for National Statistics data sets, and unfortunately there is a time lag in understanding that data. As you'd appreciate, it's a complex piece of work to collate all that information, and unfortunately often that data is a couple of years out of date. What it does enable us to do is to see a trend of performance, but that data has always been circa 2 years old in the reporting that we've undertaken. As soon as that's available, we will update it in quarter 4, so you'll be able to see the change over time.
Thank you, Chairman. On the date here, I mean, I've raised this before, but we've got lots and lots of items here, which might include the employment rate and the business survival rate, which are green, right? But there's no target. There's no target at all, and there's no description here saying what we're going to do to improve it. There's lots and lots of things. There's a number of businesses supported, jobs created by Business Builder. They're all green, but actually there's no way. I mean, how the devil can we say that it's okay? We don't know what the target is. We don't know what's being done to improve that. And I just find it just incredible that we can actually agree that. I mean, there's the number of households in temporary accommodations, 35, is the only one which I can see, which hasn't got a target, that actually has got some description about what's going on. None of the rest have. How can we say that this is actually acceptable, bottom line, when we don't know actually what the reality is? You've got to have a target, otherwise you can't say it's green. I don't think you can say it's green. I know we can within the description because it says it on the paper. If there's no target, it's green, but I find that just totally unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. That does reflect our current performance approach, where we do ask consideration about whether targets should be set for each measure, and that in part acknowledges that some are less directly within our control than others. As we approach changes for the next financial year and to reflect the new delivery plan, we are again asking measure owners who are proposing changes to measures to consider whether those measures should have targets set for them. And so this type of questioning will help us put that attention on whether we should have targets set for the measures more perhaps than we do now.
Are you saying that where we can influence, where we have hands-on, as it were, we can steer those numbers, we have targets set, but where we're measuring things that we don't have control over or can't really influence, that we don't have targets set? Is that the way you were putting it?
that's one dynamic for at times while we don't have targets. Another might be that we have a new measure and no baseline for performance to work from, and so in which case it's established to pay attention to it and make sure that we are collecting information on it. But we don't want to be setting targets that are unrealistic without that understanding.
Perhaps they think, I think the general consensus, those figures, and perhaps this should be something which goes back, that those figures should be reported, our data should be reported, but without necessarily green, amber or red, that they should be reported as the trend, you know, other important, like an addendum, another important set of data, but it is hard to put a red, amber, green, you know, RAG rating to something which you don't know what is great. You know, my son comes home and tells me he scored 7 in a test, and I go, great, and he goes, it was out of 80, and I go, that's rubbish. You know, if it's out of 10, he's done really well. So it's that sort of thing, you know. Stuart?
Yeah, I would concur with you, Chairman. Frankly, as they stand at the moment, they're meaningless. So you're not going to put, why would you put a green against something which you haven't got a baseline? And if you haven't got a baseline, you haven't got a target. It's meaningless. And I think it's disingenuous to put them in there, to expect members to say, whoever those members are, to say, oh yeah, we approve these. You're not actually knowing what you're approving, because there's nothing there. And I mean, the reality of it is, I mean, I think the specific heads of service should discuss it with the portfolio holder and frankly and honestly take them out completely, don't have them in there, which of course they should be there because they're very relevant to performance within the district. And or alternatively, make them meaningful and make them meaningful quickly, because as Fran has said numerous times, these are coming forward with this green rating with absolutely no data attached to it. And I think that I'm agreeing with what you're saying, Chairman. I don't think you can approve that. And I think whilst there is a lot of data in this report of value, and it's excellent and worthwhile, but I think it's well worth, I know we're not at the recommendations yet, but I think it's important that as we go to the recommendations, we put a very strong addendum to this, that, you know, we want these to be made meaningful and made meaningful quickly, because they're very important. It's very important data, and this is not the first time this has been raised. It needs to be addressed, Chairman.
If someone wants to just think of the form of wording they want to add to the recommendation, whilst I just ask a point about something in there, if that's okay, and then come back. Is that right if I come back to the?
My suggestion is about the recommendation. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If we can then take a suggestion on the recommendation, but just come up with the exact form of wording you perhaps want. You do now. Okay, we'll take it now. I don't want to stop you when you're in full flow.
Instead of endorse, I suggest we note with concern.
But we raise the specific concerns.
But raise the specific concerns.
So we can either endorse or not endorse, or can we not change? Obviously, because usually when we have our own meeting, we can change what we want. But are you saying that therefore our only right is to endorse or not to endorse this?
So the recommendations you have in front of you are recommendations for Cabinet. Obviously, as this is pre-scrutiny, you're being asked your views on whether Cabinet should endorse or not endorse these recommendations. I think previously you have voted for yourselves to note and recommended that Cabinet note instead of endorse. You have done that previously.
We'll do that again, I think. But Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it is something that's been raised before. I think we were talking about it in Q1 and Q2. Obviously, we're now in Q3. There is obviously a this year's figures to look at. So when we start with Q1 next year, we've got this year's figures. So I don't see that there can be anything next year that hasn't got a target that's on there that's clear. That's clear to say that's what we did last year. That's what we can do next year. So I would think to say that we can be assured that next year that will be from Q1 there will be a target would be something that could at least be noted. It'd
be nice if we had something other than note, but I think that's just me. But yeah, Lacey.
The employment rate statistics are released monthly.
So we use a standard data set that we've used every year as a national comparator. One of the things we use the commentary for example, because that's one of the ones where we don't have a target, is to set references against local performance, or regional performance, and national performance. So for employment rate, and again we're reporting quarter 4 for last year, sat at a little over 83%. The reason that was determined to be green is because that's 6 percentage points higher than the East of England average, and about 8% higher than the national average. But we use that same data set each year. We reflect on whether that data set is still appropriate and proportionate. Of course, the ONS discontinue data sets from time to time, but for a period of at least 5 or 6 years, that's the data set we've been using, the annual reporting.
I can obviously state when I turn up to Cabinet next week, the level of feeling from the committee, and I'm sure there'll be other members there who might want to contribute to that also. So I think we can make that point whilst we note this. I think that would be fair. That's my view, given the feedback from members. I would also just say that regarding some of the data, it's, given what we've said about staffing and how it can be potentially quite difficult at the moment with LGR hanging over, actually the staff turnover figures actually very positive. We're hanging on to people, as Rodney intimated about building out, or Darren may have been, who said about wanting to build a culture here of people wanting to work here and stay here. I know I've got friends and family working in local government who a lot of people are leaving. A lot of people are going into consultancy work. A lot of people in other authorities are reviewing their options quickly, and perhaps we've got staff who are reviewing their options, but they seem to be staying at the moment. I think that's very positive. I think the weird one was the contamination waste figure. The contaminated waste figure, it seems to have jumped dramatically. So I know there's something put about targets and about how that was going to be addressed, and about working with having people knocking on doors in particular areas. It seems to be perhaps there's certain things doing it. Obviously seasonally this can happen because Christmas people just can't be bothered to put their rubbish, or they want to get it all put somewhere, and they just chuck it all in one bin and don't notice, or even in the dark, dare I say it, because I have to say our bins at night in the dark, they look the same colour. I'm going out with my torch and looking for the logo on it because they look the same. They do, I know, but I've put stuff in the wrong bin before and then spent ages getting stuff out and looking like a right idiot. People think foxes are at work and it's me and it's in the bin. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, there was the issue with the app, which could mean that people were having the wrong bin out, so therefore the other bin would then be overflowing, so they might have been then contaminating it, because it might have been a confusion on that. But I found that of course it's Christmas time, you have extra, and then I found I was sort of playing catch up the whole time, and obviously where I had seen the app issue, someone else might not have done, and they might have then missed it, and if they'd missed a week there would have been even more where I was playing catch up and I didn't miss a week, so someone would have been really.
Yeah.
Just give you some context on that. It is a new indicator, obviously, as well. Bear in mind it's a sample. So every 75 tonnes that goes into the MRF, there's a 60 kilogram sample, which is a relatively small part of 75 tonnes. Unfortunately, you can pick the wrong sample with a lot of contamination in it. So that you have to bear in mind that I think it will say in the evidence, or the supporting evidence against the indicator, that we've still got a very good contamination rate compared to other parts of the county. So while it's higher than I'd like it to be, it's still very good compared to other parts of the county. What we'll also probably do moving forward is move to a rolling average. So it gets away some of the fluctuations, as was pointed out by a member. Over Christmas we see large amounts of contamination we don't see during the summer months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
How often are the measures actually reviewed? Because a bit like the one for your food ratings. It's consistently been at 96% for 3 years, but your target's 97. So is it being set at 97 because you want to see the improvement, or is that where you feel we should be on a national average? Because it looks like we're just not ever seeming to get closer towards it.
So we mainly focus on a review of whether measures are still appropriate, including the targets set for them once a year in preparation for the new financial year. I wonder whether on that measure, Louise, whether you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. This is one of the performance indicators that we are actively looking to change as of Q1 because as a team and service, we're not particularly happy with the current performance indicator. It is, compared to other local authorities throughout Norfolk, Broadland, and it is performing consistently higher in terms of the percentage of food hygiene rating premises with 4 or 5. Yeah, it isn't, in my mind, it isn't demonstrating a poor performance. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Can we also make sure we get a commentary on each one? Because I see some of them, there's not the commentary on some of them.
We will take that for feedback back to the officers who contribute to this and the measure owners as well. We do generally attempt to focus on that commentary and to increase it, but we will make a note of the feedback that you've raised there and bring that into discussions in preparation for the next quarter's reporting.
Thank you. If we've exhausted that, do it on the basis of noting the recommendation. I mean, that's just our form of wording, but we note the recommendation instead of to recommend the recommendation. Is that the way we would do it? To recommend, rather than recommendation, we've done it, it's just to note the recommendation. If we're happy to... Sorry.
Reasonable to note the recommendations, but with the comments we've made, if you'd be kind enough to take those to Cabinet, because you know, this is a reoccurring problem, and I think the key message is that it needs to be addressed, Chairman.
And that's no reflection on officers because they're working to the parameters that are set. So, sorry if you've taken the flight here today, Matt, but it just, you know, if you can take that away as well and feed that back through your channels, because you're having to take the rap for the, you know, what is actually a very thorough set of measures in the main, but we just want all of the information rather than most of it. Thank you. So on the basis of noting it, all those in favour of noting.
Is that both recommendations?
Both we're going to do, hang on, let's have a look. We're on, which one are we on now? Sorry, I lost my point. We are there. Sorry, to endorse the performance for Q3 and to endorse the current risk management. Are we doing it for both? We would like. Yep. Happy with that? Everyone's nodding. Yeah, okay, we're going to note for both. All those in favour of noting both?
And that's carried, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Matt, you're back with us again. Delivery plan, item 12. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the proposed delivery plan that you see in front of you has been developed to address the final 2 years of our current council plan, taking us through to 2028. It's been developed with input from members, including through the all-member workshop held in November last year, and the items included have been agreed with portfolio holders to propose as part of that overall delivery plan package. It includes a mix of new initiatives as well as initiatives continuing from the current delivery plan, in essence progressing them to the next stage. Happy to take any questions from there, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask or comment on? Peter.
Well, it's the same point again, really. We're not entirely sure if we're going to succeed because the measures aren't there. At least I don't see them.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see in the report it references that we will develop measures that reflect them through Q4 in preparation for the next financial year. So that follows the same timeframe that we're talking about those changes for the existing measures as well. The purpose of that is to understand which initiatives are going to be approved in the delivery plan as we build the measures for them.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Yes, thank you. It's good to see the new measures in there. That's really good. So just looking at one of them, S4, which is the Let's Go campaign tourism initiative. So my question is, really good to see it. Has it been have all of these new initiatives been budgeted for? Because I don't know what the cost of that might be in terms of staffing or literature or whatever is involved. Is it all in the budget?
George, would you be able to provide an explanation of that as an example?
Yeah, certainly. So yes, all budgeted for. The way that we support tourism efforts regionally has changed a little bit. So there's been some structural changes in tourism support. Something called local visitor something partnerships. I forget the acronym. There are too many acronyms in the public sector. Have been established, and there's no longer a requirement for us to make contributions financially to those each year. Our tourism officer has come up with this Let's Go campaign initiative, which is being designed at the minute. And in fact, we're getting some volunteer officers to help with the walk exploration. But yes, that's funded through those original contributions with the LVEP as another way of promoting the local area.
Do you think there's a possibility that some of these, because obviously this plan for 2024 to 28, and we don't have a delivery plan which delivers lots of pieces of paper for a new council that they won't even want. Do you think there is a possibility this delivery plan will be severely cut short, or things may actually be dropped from it in the next few months?
We have asked for clear consideration to be given to that in terms of whether initiatives can be completed before shifting to a new unitary authority, for example, for the benefit of our district, where that would extend past shifting to that new authority. And that's one example of how we've asked for consideration of that. So each of the items that have been included in here have been put forward as what CLT and portfolio holders see as appropriate, given those upcoming changes.
Sorry, yes, this sort of reflects back to one of the questions I had previously around the Rackheath. So on page 176, reference S2 was the one that where it mentions the North Rackheath Community Hub. Business case developed by Q3 26-27. So it's got the business case in there, but again, there's nothing around funding or anything else like that, and that's my main concern on the deliverable. So, and where is that funding coming from? How will it be delivered and everything? Obviously, a lot of that will be set out in the business case, but in the preamble, there's nothing really to quantify what it actually means.
You will, of course, see that all the items are covered at only a very summary level here, with a lot more detailed work to be done. I wonder on that one, George, whether you'd be able to provide an explanation to how that would play out.
You're exactly right. So much of that detail has been explored as part of the business case. Once we know what is deliverable on the land that's available, we can start to look at the approximate cost of that construction and then come up with a plan to secure that external funding. It's worth noting Broadland's been historically fairly successful in securing external funding for capital expenditure, whether you look at the Broadland Food Innovation Centre or the Broadland Country Park Visitor Centre. So there are opportunities out there. They change from time to time, but that will be explored as part of the business case, which we're committing to developing by Q3 26-27.
Caroline.
On the same subject, I noticed that
its Tavern Medical Community Hub isn't noted in here. I do understand that funding is being sought for that, but I am pleased to see it actually in black and white in the report. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On that note, it would be really good while the business case is being developed if it was actually engagement with local members, so that we can actually, because we know our area, we know what's available already, and so it would be really good to have those conversations really, or be included in the conversations, to be frank. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I think looking at some of the timescales, obviously when we're talking about 2028, I personally, I think we're working on something which couldn't be completely different by 2028, regarding the fact that we're still talking about things happening in 2027, which would completely scupper that. But then looking at something else, say, for instance, the Let's Go campaign, where that says delivery timescales Q1, well, that's only a sort of couple of months down the road, as it were. And we would need to have some of that come through now to be ready for sort of Q1, I think. But I've sort of looking through them to see what the time, lots of the timescales are 28, but yeah, the next page as well, the M1 is 25. There's plenty that should be maybe coming forward, and I don't know if it's planned to be coming forward, because obviously if they're bringing a lot in to do it, that would be quite a busy program.
I can speak specifically to M1, so that's the first class customer experience programme. So that was set out as part of the customer experience business case that came through last year, potentially the year before. And the delivery items under the outcome sought are in relation to what was agreed as part of that programme business case. And then underneath that you have the delivery of a business case for virtual agents. Again, that came through over in Scrutiny. Again, I think that was earlier this year, and that is into its proof of concept stage. So the next part that you will see is the output of that proof of concept, and again, an investor save case come through should the proof of concept show that that is something that is something that we might want to deliver.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, it seems that members are at least pleased to see some of the things in there which are affecting wards which we have interest in. Let's move to the recommendation to recommend that Council approves the adoption of the delivery plan for 2026 to 2028. All those in favour?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Greater Norwich 5-year infrastructure investment plan and annual growth programme. Thank you, Matt. And says here Adam and Tanya, that would be right, yes? Yeah. And I've read out a name before and it's been a completely different person.
Far away. So Tanya and I are going to do a double act. This is obviously quite a broad-ranging subject area. If I briefly introduce the report, so it follows on from what was presented to the Greater Norwich Growth Board on the 11th of December, and as members will know, because this is a process we go through on an annual basis, the recommendations from the 5-year infrastructure investment plan and annual growth programme need to, in order to take effect, need to be agreed separately by Broadland, Norwich and South Norfolk. In this year's report, there are two main threads. The first thread is agreeing the 2026-27 annual growth programme, and the second, which I'll come on to, is utilising City Deal borrowing facility. So for Broadland, the annual growth programme, the highlights there are committing 500,000 to a pooled sill to Blowfield Park Community Centre, which I think came up in the discussion earlier with Rodney, and then a further 150,000 have pulled still to provide paddle courts at the Nest training facility near Horsford. The second thread to the report is the City Deal borrowing facility, which, if we didn't utilise it, would expire at the end of March this year. The background to this goes back some time and is described in paragraph 3.9 of the report. It dates back to the coalition government, and back in 2013 we signed an agreement which enabled the Greater Norwich area to access £80 million of borrowing at a rate 0.2% below the standard Public Works Loan Board rate that would be available to councils. Agreement is now sought to utilise that remaining 25.5 million, the majority of which, 18.5 million, would be taken by Norfolk County Council to further transport for Norwich projects, and also be ring-fenced to the Capital Schools programme by the County Council for Greater Norwich. As paragraph 3.21 goes on to explain, taking this opportunity makes financial sense in its own right, because it's a facility we've secured, albeit many years ago, but it also has the benefit of maintaining a pot of money that we can invest in future projects in 2027, 28 and 2028 and beyond, and that forecasted fund is 10.5 million. Without that, it'd be reduced down to about 3 million, so that would open up the possibility of not being able to create a fund for the next financial year. The rest of the report, as you'd expect, follows the usual format. So section 5 gives you the other options, section 6 deals with the issues and risks, and then you have the conclusion at section 7. Together these all cover the main topics that you'd expect: the partnership arrangement, project management, control, delivery of the projects, borrowing authorisations, and the loan repayment, and then of course you've got the recommendation at 8.1 that I described.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask at this point? Eleanor.
Yes, thank you. Just an observation. This report came to Communities Housing and Planning Policy Development Panel on the 17th of December, and I think we did have quite a discussion on it and raised quite a few questions, and I think I asked some, and I can't remember exactly what I asked. We haven't got the minutes for that meeting. It would have been helpful to have had the minutes so that people could see what was raised by the policy panel before it came here. So I don't know if you are able to give a quick resume of what we actually came up with then, because it might stop us from duplicating questions here. Thank you.
I'm struggling to cast my mind back. There was a discussion about the overall position of the fund. I think we talked about the benefits of utilising this fund. So obviously the city deal from 2013 was significant for the area. It was a strong opportunity that was provided to us. So I think there's some questions about the optics. Were we not to take advantage of that funding, and that the merits of seizing that opportunity were discussed. And then I think from memory we then went into detail about some of the projects, past, present and future, which the SIL funding has contributed to. We've of course had SIL since 2013, so this is quite a long running piece of work.
I've got some of the notes from
Yep.
So there is a hyperlink within the report that takes you to the digital platform. We talked about how some of those projects hadn't transferred, the completed projects hadn't transferred across. So I'm happy to say that the project team over at the Greater Norwich Growth Board are updating that digital platform. So it's all comprehensive. We spoke about the GT16 Rackheath projects and how they are in the pipeline for projects to come forward. we talked about how members might inform that sort of wish list of projects and how members could get in touch with ourselves and the project team at the growth delivery team. The wish list or the pipeline of projects is an appendices to the 5-year plan, so you can view that list there. We spoke about the oral health school, and we also talked about which education projects are coming forward as well in that meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful because I do remember those. So I think I had some other questions. It seemed interesting to me that none of the Greater Norwich, it says in the report, I'll have a look, I think it's paragraph 3 point something, that none of the Greater Norwich councils have current use for the borrowing. And I thought that was rather interesting. Don't they have projects that they want to get done? I just thought it was a bit odd, so that the money's going to go back into a fund to be pooled. But I just thought out of all of those councils, some of them might have a project in the pipeline to spend the money on.
So they have to be projects that are ready to be completed by March 2026 in order to be able to draw down that loan fund.
Anybody else at this point? Martin, then Fran.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, partially covered what I was going to say. So yes, we discussed around the Bracky development, the schools, because of the primary school coming forward in phase 1, and then obviously how we then looked at the leisure facility to come forward, and also then we also from page 283 we looked at the school of oral health, to look at that as to the completion, because I think here it's saying that a lot of it's I don't know whether this is completely up to date on there, because our understanding was it was complete, because they were going to take the first influx for 2026, but the approval hasn't come from the relevant authorities within government, so it's more likely to be 2027 before they came forward. Whilst we're glad that it's there, but we just want it to be utilised.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just one question really, and following on from the School of Oral Health, but we've got on page 247, it's GP074, it's around Plumstead Road, the Priority Junction, which is, it says it's no longer a priority, and I know, I've had no notification, no notice of this, so I wonder why it's no longer a priority. So that was my question. But on the School of Oral Health, I know I actually spoke to the Vice-Chancellor last week, and he said they're all ready to go. They just need the funding to actually train people. So they're ready to go, and they want to do it, and it's supported by our MP, Jerome Mayhew, but also other MPs too, trying to push this. So it's a real shame if this doesn't get the go-ahead this year, because I mean it's still a long way to September. So I just want to say it's a real shame if we don't manage to get this off the ground this year, really. Thank you.
I believe the Plumstead Road project is related to what's referred to in the area action plan as the GT8 land, which was land related to a Broadland growth project. And I think the delivery of the junction is tied to the delivery of that development. So I think that's the reason for it being withdrawal. And as Tanya said, the key point with these projects is their deliverability in the short term.
And of course, as we've only got a matter of weeks, it's not to be delivered. No.
Can I just raise a little bit of an issue regarding the recommendation 2 to include the following projects in the Council's capital programme. Now, I represent Horsford. The nest is not near Horsford, it's technically within the parish of Horsford. There is perception from people in Horsford that using the nest is like trying to break into Alcatraz or even out of Alcatraz. It's very arm's length. I mean, I just literally just clicked on the website, and it's, yes, make a booking is there, but it's very hard to book facilities there unless you are a very big established club who've got links. I know Horsford Football Club have, and they use the facilities down there. But the Nest is a brilliant facility. Don't get me wrong, I'm there with my school next Tuesday, but my school's a Norwich school, and they're very focused. They're not. It's not an organisation that I would say is Broadland focused or community focused. You could argue they are focused on the whole community of Norfolk. So Broadland gives money, which actually we allocate money to an organisation that is actually sharing that out with, you might say, everyone. Well, you go, great, and I'm not trying to be parochial, but when I look at someone like Blowfield Community Centre, I bet they are focused like lightning on their community, Blowfield and Brundle and all those places around there, and that they are providing, that will provide a bigger service, not just a bigger bang for the buck because it's $500,000, but a bigger bang for the buck for local people that they will notice and really feel than actually the Nest. So I'm wondering to what extent we actually say, what are you doing? How is this money going to be used? Will Broadland residents get a reduction? Horsford Parish Council have approached the Nest about things, get nothing, don't get a discount, don't get anything, yet they're within the parish. And it seems to be that it's a very well run organisation that really want to know what they want to do with their facilities, and they do put on this, and I'm not trying to denigrate them in that sense, but I'm wondering what we get back from Broadland contributing other than the little bit of a share that we get where they share with everyone else. So I don't know if anyone's able to speak on that.
In very general terms, from speaking to Phil Courtier as Director of Place, I know that he has very close links and regularly meets with the directors from the Nest. So I think we do have both the political influence through the councillors here and at an officer level, those relationships to push that, more Broadland focused agenda. But I don't have a specific point to make.
I just feel that we are providing a fantastic resource for everyone. Great, and again, I'm sounding parochial, and perhaps I am being a bit parochial, but when we've got something like that, and it's as near to Helston, so I know Lacey sat there and probably the same thing, and people from Helston, I know, they've never used the Nest. It's just down the road from them. People from Horsford, it could be in a different country as far as we're concerned, because whenever anyone has been inquiring about it all, and I just worry that we build them the Nest paddle courts project, and then they set up their own club who use it for all their benefits, for all the people they've got, and you go, well, that means people are using it. But and all those people could be from Norwich or South Norfolk or somewhere else, and what's happened? Broadland have contributed and built a lovely facility, which Broadland people, local people, don't get any benefit from. So that's just my concern. I'm not opposed to providing money for the Nest because, it is a great facility, but I just wonder what we get back. I'll go to Martin and then Caroline.
Thank you. Just coming back against that, again, I would, obviously I've been banging on all night about the facility for Racky. I mean, it's a huge development, 303,850 homes plus other homes around there. We would expect the leisure facility being provided there to be of a suitable size and nature, that it's not just for Broadland. It's not going to be just for Racky. I would expect, or I would hope, that we would provide a leisure facility for most of the local area, which would encompass North Norfolk, South Norfolk, Broadland, maybe even people from Breckland, other areas. So I understand what you're saying about the Nest, but I would hope that the facility that we would look forward to would be of a suitable nature, and therefore we would be taking funding from the Greater Norwich Growth Board, from all of these other areas to help to support that.
Terribly parochial. Ben, want to come straight in, and I'll come to Caroline.
All I was going to say was that it's obviously completely right that Broadland members should be parochial about the money, but I just wanted to give that wider picture about the fact that it is a pooled SIL pot that all three of the authorities pay into. And if we look further down in the report, there are other projects in there that the money is going towards, such as the School of Oral Health, that everyone will benefit from. So we just need to sometimes think that the benefits that residents of Broadland will feel will also be felt in other areas as well. So the money that goes into the city, there will be benefits to Broadland residents. Similarly, when it goes to South Norfolk, I'm sure there'll be residents to the city residents and Broadland residents. So that's always been the idea of the Greater Norwich partnership and this pooling of the SIL monies. And some years, Broadland will pay more in other years, the city will, in others, South Norfolk will. So it's that quid pro quo across the whole area that Broadland will have benefited in other years, and perhaps this is a specific example with the nest, but there are other ones in there where I think Broadland will have benefited in previous years.
Caroline.
I just want to say I agree with you completely about that. We seem to have a plethora of paddle courts opening around at the moment, and I'm quite surprised we're spending all this money on the nest. We have a fantastic new paddle court in Taverham, so I just want to promote that now. Thank you very much.
And I didn't want to come across as being like just sort of, which I have. I've come across as being Mr. Negative, and what like my son plays football regularly down the Nest for Horsford, and my school was there on Tuesday. We're yesterday, Monday. We're there next Tuesday. So we make use of this, and so many schools do. I just wonder how we're opening up the doors to say, when this money is being paid for by local government or taxpayers across Broadland and Norwich and South Norfolk, are those taxpayers getting their foot in the door to ever be able to use those facilities? Because I think they feel that the barriers are there.
The question that I had was around, obviously, this is the 5-year plan. With local government reorganisation and everything else, which will come into fruition during that period, and with areas, some having SIL, some not having SIL, how will that play out with balance of funds at the point in time of LGR, etc.?
I can only speculate, I suppose, but what I would say is that the government has made various announcements about wanting to evolve how infrastructure levies are collected, so we may see some changes at that national level. Obviously, we've had SIL since 2013, so we're probably getting to a point where we would now start to think about when are we going to have a future SIL review, and how we make sure we pitch that rate at a level which delivers the most infrastructure but doesn't stifle development. So I think LGR is just one small component of that wider debate about how you keep a SIL levy that's up to date, and both in terms of the amount of money we collect from development, and then also how you spend it.
Thank you. I note in the report there's some projects under Norfolk County Council. I assume that Norfolk County Council is delivering them. I think one of them is Train Wood on the annual growth project. Just to check, are the Norfolk County Council projects only in the Greater Norwich area? Right, so they're not projects that could come outside that area? No. Right, thank you. Okay.
Trainwood is just at the start of the Wensum Valley.
Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I fully understood what you were saying when you were talking about the need to know if the funding is going to really support us or not, or if it's just going to be, like you say, used by others with it. So I fully understood what you're getting there. And I feel that this fund, when we've seen especially with the big road projects, if you think we've had both one in Broadland and one in South Norfolk that I don't ever think would have happened without, you know, the bypass and the Northern Distributor. I don't think it would have ever happened without a sort of fund like this. Plus, we've also got the Harrison's Wood, the country park, you know, and like I say, then projects like the sports project, the Aylsham project as well, then the Brundle project. There's been plenty of things, I think, in all areas, and I think the way that this has worked extremely well, and I think we can look at that as a real positive for all three of the districts in that Greater Norwich area.
Stuart.
Yeah, I think I find myself agreeing with your sentiments again, Chairman. I think the slight difference of the projects which Jonathan alluded to, all of those projects are open to all, including Broadland residents. I would certainly, under no circumstances, decry or say anything bad about the Nest. It's a brilliant facility. It's a brilliant facility, as you rightly say, located on the edge of Horsford, sort of almost into Helsden. All of those other projects which tend to have received SIF or sort of funding have benefited a broad cross section. As Jonathan alludes to, you know, let's use the Northern Distributor route. Effectively, anybody from Broadland, anybody from Norfolk can use that facility. But the facility at the Nest tends to be, as you rightly said, it's a facility which you book. Lots of schools, lots of clubs, etc. have the use of that facility. In fact, people come from nationally to use that facility because it's an exemplar. I would have thought it'd be sensible to get this, to bring a little bit of local benefit, is for us to link some form of funding, when we're funding something like the Nest, to some form of concession or some form of local usage or some form of priority for some local booking or something like that. I think that would actually benefit, and people would see the benefit of that in Broadland. These bigger projects, which have a universal benefit and a universal usage, but the Nest does not have universal benefit and universal usage, because if we just decided, oh, I'd like to book at the Nest, you can't do that. But as you rightly said, it's a brilliant facility, and I don't think it'd be, you know, and it's been effectively public funded, and the football club and National Lottery, Sports Council, whatever. It's a great project and it runs really well. But I think some form of local benefit could be negotiated when they apply for funding, because obviously at that stage we're in a negotiating position.
So when they submit an application, they have to show the strategic fit, so they are actually demonstrating that they are picking up some of the targets in the sports strategy, and their funding has been tied to targets. So they will have some that are targeted towards disadvantaged groups, low income groups, and sort of disabled people as well. So they will be targeting towards those to make sure that a full stream of access is available to groups of people.
Just come back on that. Yeah, that's all very good. That's based on a national criteria. But all I was suggesting is if you bring an element of local criteria, so that people who live locally and pay their taxes locally and are seeing the local development, etc., within their areas, derive some local benefit. And I think that is the time to negotiate it, at the time when they're saying we want X amount of funding. Because trust me, they'll say, yes, thank you very much, we'll do that. But going back to them at a later date, when you've already funded it, you aren't in a negotiating position.
If no one else has got anything else to add, let's go to the recommendations, which are stated there. I won't read them out again because we've all seen them. All those in favour of the recommendations?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Normally after 2 hours we'd allow people to have a comfort break, but I think this might be quite short, so I'm tempted just to push on through. Unless anyone's desperate, let's push on through. And I don't mean push on through because that sounds like dangerous if you're thinking of a comfort break. Let's move straight on to the Regulation and Investigatory Powers Annual Report and Policy Review.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this report promotes presents for consideration and adoption a reviewed and updated RIPA policy. The report came to overview and scrutiny on the 6th of January, at which time the actual main policy had been included as a background paper rather than an appendix. So you couldn't actually see it. On this occasion, it has been included as an appendix, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through. And if you have any, I'll happily go through the report again if you'd like me to, but otherwise I'll provide a quick overview. But I'll leave it open to any comment and questions. Thank you.
Has anybody got any comments? Shane?
Thank you, Chair. Just one follow-up question from the last meeting. You mentioned about using more people, more surveillance than you had done in previous time. Can you sort of put a figure on that, or some kind of target?
Sorry, it very much depends on what arises throughout the year. So we only use RIPA and authorise for specific activities which prevent and deter illegal activity. So there's a minimum criminal threshold that has to be met to seek authorisation, and that's where punishment is a minimum of 6 months imprisonment. So it's very difficult to predict what may or may not arise throughout the year, but where those situations arise, we wouldn't hesitate to use it. What I would say is that we are actively looking to increase our preventative work and acting on data that we receive, particularly in relation to work such as fly tipping. So we're looking out for data in relation to fly tipping hotspots, and where we identify those areas, we would actively look to put in place surveillance in accordance with the RIPA authorisation process. So if that situation arises, yes, we would.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to raise, I raised it before, but on page 369 and appendix 3, you refer to page 4, which is 314 in our pack here. Phil Courtier is the senior responsible officer. We haven't got an AD regulatory. Well, there you are sitting there. So can we update it to reflect that? Thank you. That was all. Thanks.
No, you're quite correct. At the time of the report being drafted, I wasn't in place, and there wasn't a replacement for Nick Howard. We do now, and there could be revision and review required at any point with policies such as these. So we will keep it under constant review and update accordingly.
Chairman, saying that, we had this discussion before about actually putting people's names in there. For the policy, would it be better just to put the actual position, i.e. AD regulatory, rather than a named person? I know you might have to in the appendix.
Oh, it's me.
Sorry. The guidance, the RIPA guidance, actually specifies that a named person should be in there. So we have that. It's not a problem that Phil Courtier's name is in the policy document, because he does have delegated powers to do that and authorise downwards.
I think that's covered. One of the points that I had was where we mentioned before about named roles and everything else like that. So we'll run that one. The other thing was obviously we didn't have the policy before, and the main amendments is by the updated Act. But what we've said before on many occasions, obviously when we're revising policy, is to look at the policy changes just to see where those are, because it's not easy just to see this. I know we've got this as the final document, but there was a preceding document, and without going through and doing a match comparison and there, it's not easy to spot what has actually changed within there.
Yeah, apologies for the policy not being attached on the first occasion. We have included within this report pack a table summarising the main changes. So I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to see those, but I'll happily go through those if you would like me to. They are summary. I mean, as a brief overview, most of them they basically reflect changes to the legislation and the new codes of practice which came in June 2025. There's some amendments which have just with reference to AI and just some other sort of technical changes which makes the policy document read better.
Apologies, I missed Appendix 3. I've read everything else and everything else, but I hadn't got that.
I just like, well, that's the idea that when we do the surveillance operation that someone's thinking of a suitable name and comes up with Operation Night Owl. It sounds like an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. from the 1970s. It's sort of sort of spy or gritty police drama or something, you know. But that's yeah. Sorry, you're too young. I still think things I talk about are relevant to anybody under my age, and you should try working in a school where children just stare at you when you mention a CD. And they're going, well, what's a CD? And you go, oh, right, okay. Are we all happy with this as it now is? Yes. So let's move to the recommendations. All those in favour?
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you so much for coming back and bringing it back to us again. I will close this meeting at it's 8:41. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody who's contributed tonight. Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't mainly browsing into